Welcome to Balance of Power. I'm Annalise Klingbeil.
I'm Leah Ward.
I'm Shannon Phillips.
And today we're going to talk about Alberta separatism, including new polling and First Nations leaders weighing in, an Edmonton Community League on the brink of closure and what it means for both democracy and third spaces in these wild times. And lastly, Canada's new national automotive strategy and reaction from environmental groups and Labour. Let's get into it.
Should we also talk? There was a lot of rumors and gossip about an early election. Should we talk about that too?
Gossip. We like gossip.
Probably should talk about it.
Is it happening, Leah?
There were rumors and gossip.
I don't want to mess with your very well crafted lineup.
No,
Annalise.
the gossip always comes first. You know this. Is it happening? What are your thoughts on a early federal election?
I mean, I'm curious what Shannon thinks.
The thing was kind of leaked out, right? Of some kind of internal conversation between Ford and Carney. So my first question whenever you read this stuff is who has a motivation to leak this out and to go and run and talk to Bob Fife? That's the first question. And I'm not really sure. Like, I actually can't put my finger on whose benefit this is because by all accounts, Carney and Poilievre are trying to work out some sort of, costly coalition. I believe we heard that word a lot in the last parliament. And so it doesn't really make sense to me, Leah. Like, figure it out for me.
Like, same. I'm thinking similar. Like, I'm asking myself similar questions. I guess here's where I've gotten. So go with me here for a minute. If right now we have Pierre Poilievre who does not want an election.
Right.
Liberals are higher in the polls. He's not doing great. He's less popular than his party. He obviously just got through a leadership review quite well, but up until last week, things were feeling a bit unsteady for him. I think, and then I think what we saw after the Conservative Convention was a real attempt to look cooperative so as to not give the Carney government a reason to call an early election. So to keep the speculation going, I think from Carney's side, helps sort of keep Conservatives in line and interested in cooperating so that the threat of an election sort of polices that cooperation and they can get their budget implementation bill passed.
Do you think it's speculation to keep people in line?
And a bunch of other shit through committee because there's so much stuff stuck in committee, right? Because the Conservatives are still being obstructionist, like little tantrum people at committee. They're not letting things through. So
don't you think even
maybe it helps?
Even just like the thought of an election, like the headlines, and people are like, oh my goodness, it's February. We just went through this. Like April was not that long ago.
I think it's also can function sometimes as a good trial balloon, right? So to Shannon's earlier point, you leak that conversation and then you sort of test the public reaction to it and you get a sense of whether or not. So Carney's like probably thinking about it or at least being advised to think about it, right? But It would be hard to gauge, outside of polling, which is, point in time, doesn't take into account what an actual campaign would look like, what Trump might trump in the, over the course. So I think sometimes it's worth, and this is something I wish, Phillips, we had done more in government, was throw things out and trial balloon them that way.
Yeah. Oh, as opposed to just marching ahead and doing whatever we wanted, polls be damned, and fuck the public. We're going to do what we like.
Why didn't you, Leah? Like, was there people pushing to do it? To trial balloon things?
I don't remember there being a lot of conversations where that was. I think we were, in all honesty, just trying really hard to do our best, and we weren't necessarily thinking. Like, no one had time to sit back and think. Maybe you did.
No.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you guys had conversations that I didn't or didn't have time for. But
I had 2 little kids and was running a wholesale reimagining of the industrial economy. So no, I had the time to think. The one time that I remember that we did move some stuff out via the Globe and Mail was around electricity when those companies sued us.
Yeah, it's true. It would be unfair to say we didn't do it at all. I can't think of another example, but I'm sure there were moments where we would have used that as a tactic. But
Well,
I think there's lots more we could have. I also think we were like really, really careful not to undercut our own credibility. And so to put something out that we might have to defend or walk back, that might take us off message, like these are things you do actually have to think about if you're going to leak something.
on the trial balloon stuff, do you think some of it too is putting it out there, gauging, and then when, to your point about Trump, Leah, when Trump trumps down the road, you may have to pull that trigger. Like that may be the reason that you blame it on. And right now it's just kind of testing the waters.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the calculation, right? Carney needs a moment in time where he can blame Donald Trump for calling an early election, and Pierre Poilievre needs a moment in time where he can blame uh, Carney for like doing it unnecessarily or opportunistically. And those moments are not going to be the same.
Interesting times. Okay, let's get into we'll move away from the gossip and get into the topics of today, though there will be more gossip throughout. We can't launch a political podcast this week featuring three people who have worked in politics here in Alberta without talking about separation. There's so many angles to this one. Frankly, it feels like it's been in the news too much, which is part of what I want to discuss. There was new polling yesterday on Monday from Angus Reid showing 2/3 of Albertans surveyed would vote to stay in Canada or would lean that way. And approximately 29% of Albertans say they would vote for Alberta to leave Canada if there were a referendum today. Most in that group, 21%, say they are leaning that way rather than definite in their choice, which was 8%. Also, part of the conversation we can put on the table is recently a coalition of 7 First Nations chiefs gathered at a press conference in Edmonton to speak about separation and to ask Albertans to stand with them and oppose a petition that could lead Alberta to become the 51st state. The message was clear. Alberta is treaty land first and foremost, and any separation talk that ignores that is not just politically misguided, it's unconstitutional. It threatens the very foundation of Confederation. Lots to dig into here. Let's start with, I think, something on everyone's mind. Shannon, I'll throw it to you. How worried should we be? Like this new polling, 29%. Yes, not all of them are definite, but 29%. I feel like it was lower than that a month ago. How does 30 turn into 51, and how worried should we be? Put me at ease, Shannon.
No, I'm not going to do that. I am. I'm on a little bit of a roller coaster on this one, but I think I said this on Strategist. I think it's increasingly evident we're going to have a referendum regardless of whatever the signature people are doing. And I am really concerned about this sort of drumbeat and the intellectual underpinnings of why we should remain Canadian. I haven't seen the articulation of it. I think the Chiefs moving out some arguments is a good start. And I do think from Indigenous voices to be talking about the economic knock-on effects is really important because, it's their relationship is with the big crown, not the little one. And that means that, all kinds of different right of access and just economic activity on the landscape depends on that Indigenous big crown relationship. And to destabilize that is so dangerous for just orderly economic activity in the province. I think we need to start moving some of those foundational arguments out into the public. I'm a
Who and
little
how?
concerned that I haven't seen them. Well, from everybody, like I don't care if it's at the level of op-ed at this point. I think that's fine. Because I want to hear why it's so dangerous to be indulging anything that comes out of these guys' mouths.
I think
And
there's
these separatists are racist, right? So we need to also engage
Call
in
it
some
what
of
it
that.
is. Go ahead, Leah.
Well,
I mean, I think there's a couple things going on. I think that there are people who, like Phillips, when you talk about sort of like editorials or op-eds, like there's people who might share demographic criteria that we share who would benefit from arguments they can use in conversation. And that's where I think the mainstream media can be helpful, or even like editorials can be helpful in that way. And I agree, it would be nice to see more of that. Although I think to their credit, most reporters offer it at least alongside. So it's not entirely absent. But But what's missing, and I think what we've also seen in polling, is that those who would lean towards voting yes to separation are compelled by the negative consequences of that. They are dissuaded. And what the separatist movement has done, I think, so effectively is they have gone to community. They're present. They're part of community. They're having conversations about a large swath of issues that matter to people locally. And they're able to create a sense of togetherness around a particular issue or around a set of issues where this becomes one of a group of things that create local identity. And that's really, really hard to fight in the pages of a newspaper. It needs to happen. I mean, Luke has it kind of with his bus did a version of this, and I think probably that's why he was so successful. But these things have to happen like face to face, neighbor to neighbor in conversation.
I hear you, Leah, but I have yet to hear some of those, top line numbers. We will lose Xtillion billion. We will lose access to our pensions. We will lose our health care.
Shannon,
right?
we're not going to lose access to our pensions. Pensions will just get converted to US dollars. Haven't you heard?
We need some of
Honestly, I
these
heard that.
push back on the magic beans.
I heard that
arguments,
yesterday
right?
from like a friend of a friend was talking to his brother who's deep in this, and he's like, my pension will be converted to US dollars. And my friend was like, you don't have a pension. He's like, doesn't matter if I did US dollars. And that I want to hit on that because it did talk in the polling about where folks are getting their information from. Obviously, I always go to the communications aspect of it, but folks who want Alberta to stay in Canada are getting their information from mainstream media and from social media. Half of those who would vote to leave told Angus Reid their information is coming from family and friends and alternative media sources. I put that in quotes because that's what Angus Reid has labeled it. But talk to me about that communication. To your point, Leah, these people are on the ground talking about it face to face from the family and friends. Is that not so much more effective than the mainstream media on an issue like this?
Powerful. Yeah. Especially as trust, sadly, like I don't celebrate this, but trust in media and government and politicians continues to decline. Those things, going to someone in your community, a family member, a trusted voice, clergy, that becomes a much superior source of information and credibility than anything we could put out on the airwaves.
So one of the things I think about with this is how we did CPP. And, the NDP was in the 30s in the fall of 23, and the government went into a CPP fight, spent $8 million advertising on the Alberta pension plan. And by March of 24, in the Leger anyway, the NDP had come up like 6-8 points, something like that. And I mean, nothing else was going on. So I can only attribute it to that drumbeat of CPP. And part of what was so helpful in that campaign, and I know I shouldn't be fighting the last war, but I think about this a lot.
The learnings from it.
Well, it is like every single one of the government of Alberta's arguments was rebutted in some way through the mainstream media, through academic analyses, through reporting, through the NDP, through other seniors groups, what have you. And what you ended up with was a whole bunch of Albertans who were armed with what I call backyard barbecue arguments.
Yeah, that water cooler stuff.
Who were able to push back on my pension is going to get converted to USD, right? Fever dreams. Who were armed. And I am concerned that we're not really armed right now. I think the chiefs can start to arm people. I think that the business community can start to arm people. I think cultural figures should start to arm people. But I don't feel armed myself right now.
Do you think?
How do you get to a hockey rink in Battle River Crowfoot?
Do you think we're hearing from and I full disclosure on the Chiefs, and I know, Shannon, you want to talk about the Chiefs. I was hesitant. So my communications business helped the Chiefs get their voice out on the national stage. It wasn't my fault. It was my business partners. But his week right after the presser was like arranging interviews with the Wall Street Journal and the Guardian, like international news that wanted to write about this because there's so much meat to the story. I personally, obviously, I'm biased, think The Voice is so essential to this, but where are the others? Where is the business voice on this? Utter silence. Leah.
Well,
Meta.
that's the thing. I think, during Sovereignty Act, when Danielle was first elected leader and she brought in the Sovereignty Act right away because she ran on it, the business community was all over it like stink on a monkey, right? They were just everywhere. You saw the chamber, the business council, all kinds of other voices, prominent business people saying this is a bad idea and this is going to destabilize the investment climate. We haven't seen that. And in fact, it's almost like they're afraid.
I think we saw
Right.
something from Alberta Chambers.
Mhm.
Does that ring a bell? I
yeah,
saw there was a number or there was something from Alberta Chambers of Commerce, but like locally in Calgary,
Atco, I
hearing a
think, said
lot.
something.
Yeah, she usually does, right? But like I haven't really seen that drumbeat in the same way that we did see it through CPP. We did see it through Sovereignty Act. We
Yeah.
haven't seen it yet.
Why do you
They
think
are
that?
midterm though, right? Well, I mean, they've got a couple of years left in their term. Well, a year and a half, I guess.
You think businesses are
October
waiting it out?
27. Well, I think they're waiting it out, and I think they also have it's possible they have business before the government, and they think that this is just gonna this is a bit of a fit, and it'll pass.
But there's also voices that would normally, I think, would normally have some numbers or some data to add to this that have been handicapped by the fact that they were put on the Alberta Next panel, which was super intentional, right?
Mhm.
Like this is I don't know how much I want to name names here, but there's people on that panel that would normally be sharing a lot of information that people could then use for those backyard barbecue conversations, right?
Well, certainly Trevor Toome was during CPP, and he was put on the Alberta Next panel. We haven't heard boo out of him. Although I did notice last week he did put out a cost of separation. So if he's starting to start his engines back up,
Good,
then
Trevor.
great.
Keep it up,
More
Trevor.
power to him.
I sure
Right?
hope
We need
so.
more of that, not less.
What's the role of big city and I guess small city? I'm thinking like Calgary, Edmonton, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Grand Prairie in Alberta of mayors, councillors, especially those that lean perhaps more conservative, that maybe have good relationships with Danielle Smith in the province. What would your advice be for them? How do they, tread the relationship they have with the premier while being adamant that Alberta needs to stay in Canada?
I mean, for me, I think we have heard both NAC and Farkas have made their position clear. I think maybe that's a different question in terms of making clear your position versus being an active player in the conversation. So I'll kind of lean into the second. If we trace back sort of like what is driving this sentiment, like what is making people want to consider a drastic move like separating, and it comes from legitimate or otherwise feelings of unfairness or struggle or not realizing like their potential or how they imagine their life and family going, fewer job prospects, economic uncertainty. I mean, it comes from those places. And I think what local leaders can offer they might be better positioned to sort of get at that root cause is to offer pride of place and a sense of movement, a sense of sort of making life better or why we ought to continue trying, at least at the local level. I think that's something that's particularly unique to what local leaders can offer.
Shannon, do you think even like wearing a Canada flag pin, like are there subtle like choices in dress or walking the lines in the way you speak about it that can still be like rah Canada, Alberta should be part of Canada, or just come out
Yes.
and say it really boldly?
I mean, they can do all of those things. The other thing that they can do is again to the economic argument. They can talk about, all of the investment that they're looking forward to. That either people are starting to hesitate, or investment inquiries that now have this little asterisk or footnote attached to them, or explain to me how scared I should be about the investment climate in this province. That stuff's going to start to happen. I know it's already happening. And mayors are uniquely, and councils are uniquely position to be able to receive some of that on the ground information and then share it to the point about, yes, they can do nice things about why we should continue to be part of the Federation, but they can also be part of the negative consequences, explaining the stakes, because that's the piece that has, for me, been missing, is who is telling me about the stakes of this. Right now, all I have is, oh, well, maybe I'll get a better deal out of Ottawa if I threaten them. And that seems like the stakes then redound to maybe I should be separatist curious.
Yeah,
Ben,
or
Leah, you're
even,
nodding.
I mean, I can't think, maybe one of you has an example of where there's a project or a program or something that is felt and experienced locally, but tied to federal support, and to
I do.
articulate where, oh yeah,
I
what?
have a
Every
big
fucking
one.
hospital?
No, but
Well,
okay. Poke some holes
I don't
in
think people
this.
believe that.
Poke some holes in
Oh,
this.
this is a massive federal transfer. We could start talking about it, right? We could talk about the billions upon billions that come into this province for the health transfer and the social transfer.
I mean, however true that is, I think the equalization argument and the mis and disinformation around what goes where and how much kind of obliterates that argument. I mean, maybe I'm wrong or being overly cynical. I just think that people will think, they'll simplify that and think that if we are no longer paying into, I'm making air quotes, equalization, it more than compensates for that federal transfer.
I think it's time to start actually, like, nobody's talked about federal transfers. Nobody's talked about OAS and GIS for seniors. Nobody's talked about the child care agreements. Nobody's talked about the transit agreements. You know what I'm saying? Like, and when you add it all up, I think that people just don't understand the stakes yet. And the
Shannon, our
consequences.
pensions in those non-existent pensions in American dollars. Okay, last one on this, but just poke some holes in this this theory that I have. So maybe it's the Calgary bubble that I'm in, but people are talking a lot about the Olympics right now. Olympics are happening. Calgary could have bid on the 2026, didn't happen, referendum. People are longing for, alternate world universe where the Olympics would have been here in Calgary right now, which there's absolutely no snow. It was like 18 degrees all last week. Anyways, do you think the 2038 Olympics is what we need as yet another distraction, but a way to keep Alberta in Canada? Because there's this chatter in Calgary, like, should we bid on the 2038? Who could be the face of it? What was learned from last time? And if that goes forward, how do you do the Calgary? It's the Calgary Canada Olympics, not Calgary Alberta Olympics. Talk to me about this. Is the Olympics going to save this debate, Leah?
Has the Olympics ever saved anything?
No, never. Never.
I mean, I can't help but cry at the Tim Hortons commercials, though. So I can't slag too hard on the Olympics. But I think this is so fascinating. I was having this conversation with some of my colleagues recently about sort of the politics and economics of the Olympics and the Russia's push to get back in, and where Trump will want to accommodate, and the position then that puts Canada. So maybe, Annalise, the Olympics in Calgary would actually be the impetus to separate Alberta and make it part of the United States, because I don't know how we solve that problem.
The opposite. Okay. Shannon, is it
I mean, my God, the IOC is so fucking corrupt, for starters, right?
I know.
Like,
I totally agree with you.
Which is, I guess, aligned in some ways with the way that this government does business. But you'd have to get some kind of support from the province, for starters. But I think the larger thing that I would say on this is no one's coming to save us. There is no silver bullet.
The Olympics are coming to save us, Shannon.
And there isn't one thing that's going to solve this. To Leah's point about where it comes from and what has been feeding it for the last decade. Right around natural resource policy, making it seem so existential that you have to burn down the whole country over a 30-cent per barrel carbon tax. And that is how things have been packaged by the conservative right for a long time. Let's name who has done this, and who, and Jason Kenney now can go around being sad that the country's being torn apart, but he did it for a decade. Now we are in this particular pickle, and I do not think an orgy of bribery and graft is actually going to fix the problem.
But it can
If
get us more
only, though.
infrastructure, Shannon. It's funny because last time around I was very anti-Olympics, very. But now that I have little kids and Calgary needs so much infrastructure, maybe it's not the worst idea in the world. So I don't know. Okay, last words on this, just for those listening, not last words on the Olympics, on the separation issue. I'm sure we will continue to discuss it. But for those listening who are like me, feeling helpless and worried about that 30% and that 30% becoming 35, 40, 45, 50, what, like, give me some advice, give listeners some advice on what they can go out and do.
I mean, Shannon, I know you've been saying, like, talking about the risk, so I want to pick up on that, because I think what the biggest risk here is that the pro Canada folks won't take seriously the possibility of a referendum landing on the yes side. That the motivation of the separatists will far exceed the motivation of the pro Canada group, and that's where I think that's the sort of part of all of this that I think scares me the most, is that we end up with a Brexit situation where nobody really takes it seriously, and then all of a sudden, oh my God, we've done it. So I think if we imagine ways of motivating the pro Canada side, it probably is around what you could lose, what's at risk, what the personal cost is. Maybe it's another CPP campaign. Maybe it's just like the closer you get to someone's pocketbook, the closer or the stronger that motivation gets.
I've been thinking about that too.
What's
but
your
there's
advice?
Two things people can do right now. So Forever Canada or Forever Canadian, Thomas Lukaszik's outfit, are out there doing essentially like sign up to support us for the inevitable whatever happens later, right? In terms of, well, depends on the question and if it's a clear question and so on, which I'm sure it won't be. But to sign up to be on the pro Canada side. So people can do that. They can do it right now. The other thing is there is an active a petition around coal in the Eastern Slopes. And a lot of these are the same volunteers that were doing signature collection for Forever Canadian, but not necessarily so. And when you plug into this, you're helping to get that petition or that citizens initiative referendum happening. But the other thing you're doing is getting to know the people that inevitably you will be working with on the no separation or yes to Canada, whatever it ends up being.
Are you saying lock
Like-
them in a room together?
Well, volunteer.
I'm saying just
You're
go
saying
out and make
volunteer.
friends. And because inevitably you will get your reps in, right? Because politics, especially at the ground level and organizing level, is about getting your reps in, figuring out who you can get along with, who you can't, figuring out who's who in your community, and who's got the sort of get shit done ethic and who doesn't, and those are right there for all of us, right? All Albertans. So. And I guess the third thing that people could do is if there's an Ontario person that feels like they should help, you should tell them to fuck off in no uncertain terms.
I'll pick up on your go volunteer thread, Shannon, because it's a wonderful segue to our next topic. This one is niche, but stay with me. I find it fascinating. So media in Edmonton recently covered a story about the King Edward Park Community League, how it's on the verge of closing because they just can't find enough volunteers to keep it going. There's no big scandal, just people who are exhausted and no one coming up behind them. They've been a few people short of a full board for quite a while now, and they've told media if they don't fill the board at their upcoming February 22nd meeting, they'll have to close. Last year, the Twin Brooks Community League in Edmonton paused operations, including its skating rink, until it could recruit enough volunteers. In Calgary, we call them community associations, not leagues. I've had the pleasure and frustration of serving on one for a couple of years. Basically, for those unfamiliar, in cities like Calgary and Edmonton, there's like upwards of 150 community associations or league that are all volunteers serving capacities ranging from like events to fundraisers, organizing the community garden, flooding the skating rink, to upkeep and maintenance in Calgary of city-owned like facilities. So it's no small task for a bunch of volunteers who know little about or have any interest in being a landlord of a crumbling facility. When I was on my community association, they're as strong as their volunteers. If there's someone who is retired and has a lot of time and a passion, their events can be really great because that person's doing it as essentially a full-time job. I'm so interested in the story of a potential community league closure because it's such a statement, I think, on the times we live in, when a lack of volunteers and engagement is a widespread problem. It's also a time when loneliness is high. Third spaces are not what they used to be. People are on our phones a lot. So let's talk about this. Shannon, you were just talking about going out and volunteering. You obviously have a lot of experience with people volunteering for you. When you heard about what was happening with this community league in Edmonton, what were your thoughts?
Community leagues in Edmonton are unlike anything I've ever seen in any other urban space. I mean, there might be other cities who have this, but Edmonton is renowned for its community league culture. And these are places that have real infrastructure and are real anchors. And some community leagues have hosted, childcare facilities and other things, like real community anchors, not just a place where you can, book for a little, a smallish wedding or those kinds of things, but actual, like, fully functioning contributors to, the local economy and the local community. These things are cyclical, though, and it goes with the neighborhood too. So a lot of these established neighborhoods in Edmonton, you're seeing, the property values go up. So you might be seeing younger families going out to live, way out in the vinyl siding suburbs because they can't afford to live in areas that are in the established neighborhoods. And the people who can are maybe, aging boomers or these kinds of people who frankly don't have the time or inclination. Or if it is a place with young people, I just watch my sister now, like I'm kind of through it. My kids are teenagers now, but when you have little kids, volunteering is not high on the list.
Nope.
And if there is volunteering to be done, it's generally by women and it's down at the school to patch some of the holes in our crumbling education system.
Yep.
So there's lots of drivers for this. But at a minimum, in a place like King Edward, I would think that, some targeted canvassing, in order to bring people to a community event to talk about it would be the first thing that I would do. And I honestly, like, the volunteer culture and things have changed over the years. It's changed in the party. It's changed in nonprofits and charitable organizations that I've been sort of adjacent to a lot. And I know in the party, you end up having to pay people to do things. And
Has it always
and I
been
think
like that,
that's
Shannon?
fine. No, I mean, not back in the day, but increasingly, unless the people are retired, you kind of have to compensate them a little bit. I don't think that's a terrible thing, right? Because, people's economic life being what it is.
What
Leah,
you
jump
said
in.
cyclical, like when would you have observed a decline in volunteerism or community leagues facing these kinds of troubles? I mean, I could have Googled this, but do you have a memory?
Well, in the last 10 years, a lot of them have really struggled, I think.
Yeah.
But, and I think some of them are like they have different kinds of infrastructure and they're embedded in the communities differently too, right? They're not just like one kind of vibe. Like they don't all have a hockey rink or they don't all,
Yeah.
have some of them have larger or smaller halls, that kind of stuff.
I mean, I think like I'm always torn in moments like this between sort of where we hold governments responsible for providing public services well and where we embrace sort of volunteerism and community activism, both incredibly important, right? Like I don't take for granted the need to be together to to build shared meaning and community. That's deeply important and I think kind of foundational to democratic participation. And also, what makes me uncomfortable about often how people talk about these moments is that it ends up landing as additional pressure on people and families who are incredibly squeezed right now, right? Like the middle class they're taking out extra jobs. There's no time, to your point, young kids plus can't afford groceries, can't afford rent, don't know if they'll be able to buy a home or keep their home. I mean, these are big
Aging
things.
parents.
Yeah.
Aging parents, exactly. Boomers who, you're right, would have been like, this is another interesting thing to watch in terms of cycle is, yeah, would have had a lot of time and energy for this type of volunteerism. They're aging now. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Shannon, when you were a politician, tell us about your volunteers. Like what was the age of those folks? And I'm going to guess it was probably older. Was there, am I wrong? And was there efforts to recruit other types of volunteers or bring people into the fold?
Yes, is the short answer from the very beginning. We never took the approach that there's like a youth wing and an adult party. We just, everybody was in the adult party. We would go and talk to our political scientist friends and say, if you know any students that are super into progressive politics, because they know they're students, and they would give us recommendations, not just in poli-sci, but in the other arts faculties too, right? If there were bright lights in there, then we would ask for those folks to be sent over to us, people who were super jazzed about politics. And some of those people are still working in politics. Some of those people came with us into government and now are doing other things. It's been 15 years. And so, yeah, and you can, we then benefited from the full range of ages. And it's different people are comfortable doing different tasks too. And that's one of the things about volunteer management that's really important. Like, give people something to do that they're not going to fail at, that they're not going to get frustrated with. And value everyone's contribution, of course. I mean, we're New Democrats, so we're pretty good at that. But also give people a reason to come back, whether if it's just food or if it's a little bit of money or whatever the case may be. You have to think about people's needs much more broadly than just their, desire to kind of altruistically, be a democratic citizen.
Leah, do you think there's, for the community league in Edmonton, like, is some of this just a comms problem in terms of, and I'm glad, I don't know if they went to media or if media saw the board meeting and got in touch and they spoke, but like, is some of it just a comms problem in terms of like, and again, the issue is volunteers, so it's hard to have volunteers to do this, but go knock on doors around the community league and tell people about it, be in media and talk about it. Like, how much of this is a comms problem and how much do you think is a fundamental societal problem that people are not volunteering in the numbers that they once were?
Anyone who works in comms loves it when people say that it's a comms problem. So, sure. I mean, I am also curious how the story came about. And I also, I think I read that the meeting is coming up in a week or two.
Yeah.
So I'll be curious if it being in the news generated interest and they were able to attract enough people to join the board. I think that's interesting. Look, like, I will always say there are opportunities to get a message out better and more clearly and in more compelling ways. I'm sure that could happen with community leagues. To Shannon's point, though, I think they're well known in Edmonton. There's not really they're understood as sort of an institution. I think my worry is much bigger than that. I think it has to do with people struggling and not having time or energy or the ability, lack of investment over decades. That means, you said it earlier, that this infrastructure is crumbling, and you don't want to end up being like holding the bag on that. And the idea that governments do less and less and expect people to step in and do more and more for very little. So I do worry about a trend that sort of simplifies this as a problem, a lack of generosity among people without considering, the larger kind of system.
I've been outspoken about that here in Calgary because you have these really old halls that are sitting on city land, and then they get rented out to the community association for like $1, but then it's all volunteers who are managing it. So you have someone who might sign up to the community league or community association in Calgary because they're new to the community and they want to meet people. And then now they're tasked with like managing this crumbling infrastructure and getting rental groups in so that they can pay for it when it's city-owned land and facility. Like, it's nuts to me.
Well, this is the thing. We've gone through 30 years of this. So
what?
I guess we could do things differently.
Shannon, do you think?
Should we try that?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Should we? I don't know. Let's just keep doing it how we've been doing it. What do you think? I mean, there's this big, like, I don't know if you're two are in this circle, but like I found like a lot of people this year, 2026, they're like, my resolution is to spend less time online. I want to be on my phone less. Like just nonstop. I don't want to scroll. I'm gonna watch my screen time. There's like, I don't know. I just feel like a big push of like, let's not be online. Do you think now is the time, I don't know, to bring back those third spaces, to bring back that community association, getting to know your neighbors, that face-to-face stuff? Like, is there, and obviously my comms brain, I'm always thinking of like an in for what's the big campaign to bring people in, but is there like a Edmonton Federation of Community League campaign about now is the time to join your community league?
Yes.
Sure.
If they have the capacity to do it.
This is it. Like if there's I think maybe the best way in on something like this, I mean, I'm thinking out loud here, but is there a way to offer more or as much as you're asking? So
What do you
is
mean?
it, like a community league or a community association that brings people in to batch cook in order to save money on groceries? Is it like, is that a way in that gets people sort of invested and tied to each other? Is it some other way to sort of capture and reflect the challenges people are facing while also bringing people in and help, or sort of encouraging an investment in that type of activity? Because I think, when I think, I don't even have full-time kids, and like when I think of taking on more volunteer activities, I can feel the stress rising in my body. I don't have time, and I am by far not the busiest person, even on this podcast. So,
But it's
you
like
know,
it's also like those people, and I mean, I have a 4-year-old and my little one just turned 2. It's like those people who are in the thick of it with little
Yeah, you're
kids
in it.
are like also who needs this the
mm,
most, and I'm like super fortunate. Our kids' daycare is this huge community, but there's all of us live near each other. We all walk or bike there. We hang out after daycare. Like it's this huge, we're so lucky, like community building thing. But as more people come into it, because they come to the park and they see, hey, there's 10 kids the same age playing. How do all these parents know each other? Like they're so hungry for it. Those ones that are like
Yep.
in those early years are who could so bet. They might not have the time to volunteer, but they have the time to like, hey, come let your kids run around in the gym while you get adult conversation for an hour and your kids are distracted, right? Like there's like a chicken and an egg thing.
This is where what is the role of the state to underpin those experiences and the infrastructure for those experiences, right? Because people can find ways to make those connections on their own, to find their way to the third space, but maybe not to clean the ducts of the third
this is
space,
it.
or make sure that the
Yeah.
fluorescent lighting is not flickering and driving everyone crazy. That somebody's changed out the bulbs. Like this is the stuff that is, there's a reason why we have funded this collectively. And there's a reason why when those funds disappear because of efficiency or whatever, who gets left holding the bag? Well, usually it's women
Yeah.
with children who are then looking for third spaces to make those connections, right? Or at least historically, it's been women with little kids, and they are the ones who, generally speaking, also are the ones who step in.
Yeah.
And so this is like it's a profoundly gendered thing, who is thought to have free time and who doesn't. When you look at time use surveys on who is doing a lot of this, even the making of the connections and so on to this day, right? Parenting has changed, I think, but it is still primarily women who are finding those third spaces, who are seeking them out and seeking out that community, the places for the kids to be and go, and all of that work, and the volunteering at schools and other things, which also is a demand on women's time.
So the gendered part of the conversation is so fascinating to me because again, I'll go to my experience because what I know right now, but how the daycare crew all got connected was the dads because most of the women in the little crew were the breadwinners. So the dads were doing drop-offs and pickups. So the dads were locking up
That's
their...
what I mean. Parenting
Yeah,
is changing,
they were
right? But in the broad,
totally
what I'm saying, the
right. Yeah,
broad,
yeah, no,
data sets that we still see, right?
100%. And I get it's like the dads were locking up their bikes together, going to pick up kids and being like, well, how are we going to kill 2 hours before mom comes home? Oh, let's head to the pump track together. Let's go to the park together. But it's like, it was the dads is where it started, which is so, anytime I tell that to people, they're like, what, how, what? And it's just like this weird, yeah, I totally understand that that's in the minority, but yeah, there's just like a, how do you get other people who are exhausted and tired and overworked to have that foot in, to see how valuable it is to have those community connections. Okay, let's move on to our last topic, folks. Late last week, Prime Minister Mark Carney unveiled the federal government's new national automotive strategy at an auto parts manufacturer in the Greater Toronto area. The new auto strategy charts the course for the industry, and it goes, quote, all in on automaking in Canada at a time when the sector is buckling under the weight of U.S. tariffs and Trump. There's a lot to Carney's new auto strategy, from the government giving billions to the auto industry to make Canada a global leader in vehicle electrification, to improving charging infrastructure. The headlines the day of really focused on the removal of the Trudeau-era electric vehicles sales mandates and the reintroduction of EV rebates. Climate change experts and environmental groups seem united in the views the new policy undermines Canada's climate goals. The headlines on opinion pieces in the days since the policy was unveiled have been not great. The Liberals' incomplete lane change on EVs by the Globe and Mail's editorial board. Canada's auto strategy is driving blind in the National Observer. And Carney's new auto policy is just as stupid as Trudeau's in Postmedia's driving section. Leah, Shannon, what do you think? If you're writing an opinion piece on the new automotive strategy, what's your headline?
We'll see,
I'm
question
less
mark.
concerned. What's that?
We'll see, question mark.
You'll see. Shannon, what's yours?
I'm less concerned about the EV mandates. So it is a change to do tailpipe, emissions regulations as opposed to sales quotas. That's true. I think a lot of environmental groups were happy that we ended up with anything at all, because Detroit was really pushing hard against any kind of sales quota. But for me, there have been thousands of job losses already, 5,000 job losses and a massive drop in production since in the last decade out of the sector. And for me, it feels like I didn't get a headline that said, if you want to sell it here, you have to build it here. And that's, as a Canadian, I mean, we have we have a smallish window on it as Western Canadians. It just looms so much larger in Southwest Ontario. But if I was Carney, I'd be driving towards that headline, and he didn't get it. The Strategic Innovation Fund of $3 billion and some other investments here and there and some other tweaks on EI, and then like your headline is on the tailpipe emission standards. I don't think that's a win, and I don't think there's clarity for working people in Southwest Ontario and the 500,000 people that are somehow associated with vehicle manufacturing in this country. I think they would have been better off to figure out the policy mix that drives to that.
Leah, what's your take on it?
I mean, I agree. And also, if you take our money, you have to stay. Like, both of those areas feel very weak to me. I think you're hearing Labor say it, both messages, right? That they're, they want anyone receiving funding from the federal government to be obligated to keep their jobs and parts and machinery in the country. And also that they want to see a, build it here kind of a policy. So, I'm not entirely sure what trade-offs are being made that is preventing. It feels intuitive and somewhat obvious in a moment in time where we're looking at reducing reliance on the U.S., where we sort of understand that this partnership we've had, particularly in the auto sector, is doomed. And we're looking to diversify and secure a sort of national economy here at home. And it's unclear to me why that like what is in the way of something like that when it seems so obvious. And Jen, Phillips, you'll probably have better ideas than me in terms of where that gets complicated. But it's such an easy throw. It's an easy message to sell in terms of the communications of it. It's an easy and important gesture to Labour, whose support you need. It makes me wonder what the electoral math is in Ontario when he keeps sort of bypassing what seems to be sort of easy, low-hanging fruit. I don't know.
Shannon, dive
I
in
don't know
there.
what you think, Shannon.
Yeah, dive in
Well,
there.
I'm actually gonna back away slowly from the actual policy details because I actually think that we should talk to a Labour person about this, and it's a bit weedy, and I don't know if
Very weedy,
but
yes.
I mean, essentially they're doing everything after the fact is the problem. So, Stellantis will close a plant, and then after the fact, we're going to go to them and say, okay, well, but we gave you this money, or we, and we need to, we're retconning everything, right? The same thing with the Sault Ste. Marie steel plant, Algoma, I think it was. They got a bunch of money and, shut down at least a shift, if not the whole and so it's happening everywhere in tariff affected sectors, and it feels like the government is following behind those corporate actions instead of having the right policy suite of carrots and sticks before they close shit down, and so that they don't touch the hot stove, right? And I think we should definitely talk to. Over the course of this podcast, we are going to start to talk to some, people who are actually in the field and experts on this.
We're going to have guests on this podcast, Shannon.
We're going to have guests.
Look at us, experts. Look at us.
I let the cat out of the bag.
Spoilers.
But I mean, this is.
Should we just name them and then they'll have to come on?
Yeah, I don't know. It makes me nervous.
What if they say no, Leah? But
you're
saying
Poilievre has started yelling about this, and he is. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying this, but he is right. And so the political lane that the Liberals are opening up.
Kind of repeat that because I don't think I've ever heard you say that. He's right.
Yeah, Poilievre is right. Well, he's very conditionally and provisionally right.
Which part is he right about? He's right about it being a mandate by another.
A fuck ton of money without some guarantees that they're going to keep people employed.
Yes,
right?
Of course, he's irritatingly right about that. Yeah.
Wait,
he is. And so is Giovanni.
Because it's obvious, though.
Where do you think, do you think Labour has entered the conversation, or what would be your advice for them to break through and get their message across?
Presser last week that was really good. That was both the CLC and Unifor. And I thought that was a very, sort of broad economy articulation of what needs to happen. And I think what it did was it set them up to be a very credible voice of balance within. But, they are also having to work things out with government right now, because government is moving forward with an industrial strategy, right? By which I mean a strategy that involves government, unions, and corporations, right? In that sort of old, post-war way of thinking about how we build an industry and support an industry. So, Labour can't always be doing yelling, right? Sometimes they have to be articulating a vision, but they do have to be seen to be standing up for their members, which are, shedding
always,
right now.
Right. That push and pull always exists. And I think they're walking the right balance. They've celebrated the things that are good for them, that they're happy about. They've signaled the things that they want to see more movement on. To Shannon's point, there's other sectors that they're also negotiating things on, other parts of other things that are important to their members. So there has to be some sort of caution in terms of what they're able to say. I think Labour needs a Doug Ford. Who's the Doug Ford of Labour? Who can be the body or the person that says the thing that B. Brusque can't say?
Who is that person?
Like a Rob Ashton type character.
Yeah. It should be probably the federal NDP.
Yeah, probably. Here we are an hour in, and they've all of a sudden popped up.
It took us an hour.
Anyway.
Stay tuned
Whatever.
for future episodes with thoughts from Leah and Shannon on the federal NDP. There will be many. Okay, last one on this. What's like the real test of if this new strategy works? If it's good? Like, is it literally just EV sales? Like, what are you watching for in the months to come on this one?
I think one of the things that makes me feel trepidatious is it is predicated on an assumption that there will be a market demand for EVs. And so that's what I'll be watching for. I don't know.
The market demand.
Right now, Canadians are actually interested in buying new vehicles at all.
Shannon, what are you watching for?
Yeah, I'm watching for, I mean, the fact is that 40% of cars sold in Canada right now are sold by companies with zero manufacturing footprint in Canada of any kind, right? Of any kind of parts or, end of the line assembly or anything at all. And really, like, confusing the tailpipe and the EV issue with the issue of working class jobs in Southwest Ontario, I think is problematic for the government, because the near term, no matter what they're making, people have to have a job. And the EV piece is almost a distraction from what are you doing to make sure that we have production incentives in this country that meet the moment of the US tariff threat. Because right now, 90% of Canadian made cars are facing a tariff from the United States, right? This is existential. So I felt like the EV conversation, I mean, I know it's linked because we are trying to incentivize, both battery and PHEVs in the country. But I think that what I want to hear is that, like, much more blue collar crunchy argument on how are we protecting jobs.
I think that came across, Shannon, in the coverage from the announcement last week. Yeah, I was going to say the
No.
existential thing, like, there was just so much, to your point about having an expert on, but like there was so much in the announcement. It was like the rebates was the headline because people want to talk about rebates, but none of the like existential why this matters so much. I don't think that came across at all.
No, but people understand what comes out of their tailpipe, right?
Yeah.
So that was kind of the confusion, and part of it is how this government is doing things. They are doing these sort of large throws, right? And they need to figure out a way to tease out the individual pieces afterwards to be clear with Canadians on what they're doing.
Yeah, it was.
I think one of the challenges Labour faces too is that, I agree. Like, I want to see the conversation shift to the workers and the extreme precarity of those jobs right now, and the devastation that ongoing job losses will cause to big parts of this country. And I think it's like reprehensible that we're not seeing that Carney is as far into his mandate as he is, and that has not been addressed. And I think if I switch to political brain, like, one of the challenges Labour has is that precarity is felt across the board and is seeped sort of all the way through the middle class, people who would understand or call themselves middle class. And so to create a political window within which you can make the kinds of investments, say, that Harper did in the bailout, for one sector, is a tough thing to get away with politically. Now, that is a different question from the right thing to do, but it does present a challenge, and I think that's where Labour could lean in, is to help make that case.
Yeah, some interesting threads there, Leah. I am looking at the time. We are going to wrap up our first episode of Balance of Power, but we'll be back. We'll have guests. We'll have gossip. We'll have a lot of fun. So thank you for joining us.
You've been listening to Balance of Power Pod. You can reach us at suggestionbox@balanceofpowerpod.ca. We always want to hear what you have to say. Our tech production is by Haxam. Our content production assistant is Sydney Whiting. And our music is by Shayla Miller.